Hello, everyone. Chris Perry here from BMC. My pleasure to be speaking with you today about 3 proven ways to break down your SecOps silos. It's fun. I got to do my first share right before lockdown happened, and I'm looking forward to the future where I can, be meeting and discussing all these things with you guys directly. But today we'll have hopefully what is a good presentation, and we'll take away some really interesting ways that we could possibly improve our organizations and ultimately have better security and better operations. So let's jump right into it. So what is SecOps? Besides being just another buzzword that we hear like blockchain and DevOps, it's a simple thing. It's the integration of your security and operations teams. And what a lot of organizations have found that by putting these two teams closer together, you'd have shared accountability for the outcomes of both the security and operational aspects when improving your environments. And this happens through several different ways that give greater visibility into security vulnerabilities. Greater visibility means your security team can do more to help lock down and harden your environment and ultimately keep bad personas from having their impact on your organization. If you've read the news even just a little bit this year, you've probably heard about the threat of ransomware. Well, it's growing, and it's been really targeting a lot of organizations who previously thought they were immune. And it isn't just held to Windows servers. They're really expanding their targets to hit anything that holds data, which obviously includes, in a very powerful way, the mainframe environment. And the last piece is when the security operations teams are really pushed together in a very strong way, you find that there's proactive security practices. Security gets baked in early so that when you do operational changes and upgrades and moving to different platforms and all the different things that happen in a dynamic world, that because security starts from day one, not only is it more secure, but it actually leads to less work overall. Because it's a lot easier to have a good standard when you start than to build out your entire new structure that you just worked on, only to find out that you have to change 13 things because it doesn't meet some compliance regulation. So proactive security practice is a major win. So if this is so good, if this is so obvious, what are the challenges? Why aren't people doing this? And the reality is that a lot of mainframe organizations are simply just not that integrated with their security teams. And when we've done research with our own research, we've done it with Forrester, and the numbers that come back are very concerning, right? 89% of companies say their security operations center, their real-time 24/7 monitoring organization of the group that's supposed to secure the entire company enterprise, say that they know when the credentials are modified. So that's great. We're good, right? Almost 90%. However, the next question kind of defined that, where they said 39% have experienced it happening without their knowledge. So what we've taken these numbers to realize is that because there's such a strong belief in the inherent security on the mainframe, that we know everything that's happening there, we've been doing it for 40 years, our mainframe is good, it's good, it's good, it's good. But because we believe that so strongly, we're blind to the fact that there are many times some very serious security issues and vulnerabilities on the platform, and that organizations aren't actively taking the steps they need to secure it. We like to say over at BMC, it's not that the mainframe isn't secure. We believe in the security of it just as much as everyone else. But it's not inherently secure. It's securable. You still have to do the work to make sure that it's as locked down as any other platform. You can't turn it on day one, install 30 different things, have 100,000 users, and expect that it's going to be unhackable. That's just not reality. So with mainframe org structured this way, not being integrated into their security teams, right? What happens? Well, you lose collaboration. I would ask if we were in a group of people right now, but we'll do it digitally. How many people believe that there's a person sitting in their security operations center that knows how to work on ZOS? How many of them can even spell ZOS, right? That's a real challenge because the team that is currently paid by your company to be your security experts, do your real-time monitoring, don't know the platform that you're using. Conversely, how many people in the mainframe environment have a deep cybersecurity background? Also, the answer is not that many. The mainframe environment tends to be very operational focused. They are experts at uptime, experts at keeping costs under control. They're the best in the business at that, but most don't come from a formal cybersecurity background. And so because the collaboration isn't there, a lot of things get missed or fundamentally don't happen. When some of our peers at BMC do their penetration tests, they find that they're able to fundamentally just get right into the mainframe get full control over everything because of some minor misconfigurations that a cybersecurity expert, if they knew ZOS, would have easily been able to say, we need to lock this down, we need to close this out, and it wouldn't have been possible. But because they don't have that collaboration and having that ultimate cybersecurity expertise on ZOS just isn't there today, it's left missing. The next part is tools, right? So once your teams can start working together, well, it really is necessary that the tools that you're using work together. So what are we talking about there? Well, the biggest one is really the Security Information Event Monitoring System, the SIEM. Right? This is your 24/7 visibility tool that you use to detect real-time anomalous and malicious activity. This anomalous and malicious activity that you need to respond to, incident response, immediately. Well, if your tools aren't integrated, if the mainframe is not integrated into the SIEM, what capacity does your security team have to actually do their job for you? Is your SOC securing the mainframe? And if it's not in the SIEM, the answer is likely no. If you're just sending records over in batch overnight, are they able to do real-time detection? We've actually found that if organizations that have had just the batch upload, that more often than not, the records were just going to sit in the SIEM data lake. They weren't even ever looked at. So you could check a box for compliance that said, are you monitoring user logins? But that checkbox doesn't actually give you good security. And so that leads to a real gap that hackers are able to exploit. And the last one is around processes. So let's say you are working this together, you are forcing this, you are doing this, you're doing vulnerability scanning on the mainframe, you are integrated into the SIEM, and you're doing the types of things that a SecOps team between a Windows server and the SIEM are likely doing. What happens next? Well, I guarantee if I was able to look into your faces today and ask you a question, do you have too many employees? Is your team bored? Do you wish that you had more work to do? The answer is absolutely not. We're all trying to do more with less. And so when you take a look at the things that are slowing us down, a lot of these are the very manual actions. I've spoken to so many of our clients when they speak about compliance and they talk about how many hours it takes for them to just run the queries, run the checks, do all those things so that they can determine whether or not they're even in compliance. It's slow, it's tedious, it's laborious. So there are things that you can put into place to automate these workflows, these orchestration automation capabilities, so that you can spend your time working on higher level tasks for the organization, like saving money, like better uptime, like growth, instead of having to run the same redundant tasks over and over and over again, simply because they have to be done. So that automation of processes is absolutely critical. And then when you finally look at what happens here, the harm, if you don't do this right, the first is contradicting priorities. When you don't have integrated security, oftentimes you get this fight between uptime, which is a core part of operations, and if you lose uptime, then something seriously bad happens, and security. Well, if I was ever to be utterly secure and I wanted the mainframe to never be hacked, I'd probably just unplug it from the internet. These are inherently contradicting. So the teams have to be able to work together to understand where we can sacrifice some availability of certain items and where we can sacrifice some security of certain items so that we can ultimately achieve our business goals. It has to be a business decision. But if your teams aren't integrated and working together and they don't share those priorities, then it's always going to be a fight. And oftentimes, again, with a lot of organizations that we work with, you get to some really bad decisions because the person who wins, whether it's security or uptime, wins because of force of personality. And it's not always the best business decision. So you want to be everyone playing on the same team and not fighting each other. The second piece is lack of visibility. And again, we've discussed this, but delayed incident response, because you don't have that real-time detection, is a very serious problem. Right? When we talk about ransomware, and yes, we have seen ransomware in the mainframe. When we talk about ransomware, what is the mainframe really, really good at? Right? What is the power of the machine? It can do millions of instructions per second. It's how we measure it. It has an actual chip for doing encryption so that it enables pervasive encryption, and it does input-output operations. Right? What is a ransomware? A ransomware literally wants nothing more than to take advantage of those three things to encrypt your data as fast as possible. So the mean time to response is absolutely critical, because when you determine that something bad has happened, like a user has accessed your encryption keys, or a user has downloaded your Racket database, or there is a process going rogue and it's going through every single file and updating them, you need to be able to respond to that as fast as possible, or there's a greater chance that you're going to have a catastrophic event for your organization. And the last one is close to all of our hearts, is wasted effort. I guarantee again, no one enjoys wasted effort, repeating tasks, redoing things, wasting time. And so the inability to get this right at first, to be proactive, just really hurts organizations. It hurts morale and it hurts efficiency. So how can we focus on improving our SecOps? How can we take our organization and ultimately make it better at achieving these goals? We're going to run through 3 specific areas. First is organizational alignment. Second is tool alignment. And the third is process and workflow alignment. Let's jump right into it. All right. So aligning your teams. This is the integration again of your goals together. And so off on the right, I threw some of the buzzwords on there. You have DevOps, SecOps. You even have the newest one, DevSecOps, which is a really fun way we integrate all 3 together. But you need to get these teams to work together. So let's get more specific. What does that look like? It means that when you take a big initiative that you have, maybe you're moving to the new Z platform. Maybe you are completely restructuring how an application works so that it can integrate with the cloud. Maybe you are going to something like pervasive encryption and you're doing a security event. Whatever that might be, whatever that big initiative is, you want to inject security into the beginning. And that's not just a phrase. You should have a security persona as a stakeholder as part of that operations process. Because by taking that person, making them a stakeholder and putting them into the process, what you're doing is you're ensuring that the end state of your big goal, your big initiative, that it's going to meet all security requirements, that you're going to get it right at the first time. And I've worked with several clients who said, Chris, we do that. We're good. Check this box. We have teams aligned. And then when you actually took a look at who they were integrating, a lot of times it was the mainframe security administrators. And unfortunately, the mainframe security administrators is still a good persona, but they're not going to give you the perspective, a lot of times, of the organization reporting directly to the CISO. So you're not going to get your SOC involved, you're not going to get your compliance and risk teams involved, and you're not going to get all those other diversity of thoughts that happen outside of the mainframe specific organization. So when I say, again, inject security, you should be getting someone that doesn't report in through the mainframe operation structure. That is integration of teams. The other thing that helps is you can spread out responsibilities. So when you get the security team in there and that individual sitting in the team and you're discussing how to go about doing everything, well, what happens when work comes up that involves the SOC, that involves the enterprise, that involves all those other aspects? Well, now they're a stakeholder, which means that they have responsibility to see this job done, and they can bring back that responsibility to their organization and get the mainframe the support it needs. Because this isn't a mainframe organization problem. Every client that I've worked with this on specifically, the security team is oftentimes just as, if not more, responsible for not helping the mainframe team as the mainframe team is for not bringing the security team in. By forcing them to be a stakeholder and a sponsor, you are forcing them to take it back and see it through to a positive conclusion. And so it works both ways. So what does this look like from an organizational perspective? Well, this is a question I get more often than any other. Who ultimately controls cybersecurity for the mainframe? And it's a really challenging one. And it's one that I've seen done, unfortunately, poorly at many organizations, because the security team doesn't want to take responsibility for the mainframe environment, because they don't have, in their mind, the ZOS talent. They have not taken the time to say the mainframe is under our purview. And so we call that at BMC an island structure, where the mainframe is an island in cybersecurity. It's doing its own thing. it has to meet its compliance checks and has, it's not completely forgotten. Organizations are more mature than that, but it's not integrated at all. And the truth is that oftentimes leads to the worst security for the platform. And what we've seen when we've done our penetration tests, oftentimes scary levels of risk that the organizations weren't even aware that they were undertaking. And so in an enterprise, what does this look like? Well, the mainframe ops teams needs to be able to support the security teams to make them aware of the current security practices. They need to support them in understanding the ZOS environment, and they need to support them in maybe a skills transfer update when they do take over. Security leadership needs to own it. And I know I'm talking to the mainframe team, but the mainframe team needs to help the security team understand they need to own it. Having the core backbone of your IT enterprise not a core part of your security plan is just not acceptable moving forward. Hackers have long realized that they can get to more than just Windows PCs, and the second a mainframe goes down for any one of your companies, I guarantee that's a catastrophic event. So the security team needs to treat the mainframe with the same priority and understanding that it treats everything else. And the last is the risk and compliance teams. We've found an interesting number of organizations that have gotten by without doing real significant audits for their mainframe because they would say things like, well, we have a 5-year plan to get off the mainframe. And they've been saying this for 15 years. But because they keep saying it, they get it by and the auditors don't check it. And when we found those organizations, our friend Mark Wilson tells a story all the time of how he was able to get full control over the mainframe, full control, complete supervisor control in 6 minutes. Well, that organization then learned the types of things they had to do in order to be compliant. So you need to integrate these things together. Let's talk about a real-world example. And this, again, is a large international bank. Well, in this case, the mainframe and CISO both refused to take ownership of security. The mainframe operation said, hey, you guys don't give me budget for cybersecurity. I don't have cybersecurity talent. The CISO needs to do it. And honestly, the mainframe operations executive was correct. The CISO refused to take ownership too, though. He said, I don't have ZOS talent. I don't have anyone with that ability. I don't have the money to go get ZOS talent. There's not even a ZOS cybersecurity expert I can get, at 25 years old, like the rest of my team. So I'm just not going to do it. And so they didn't. And, they would point at each other, but nothing ever happened. And so they didn't have any type of real-time security continuous monitoring. They didn't have any type of ability to detect anomalous malicious activity. Well, their mainframe was attacked. And the attacker was on their mainframe for 3 to 4 months. Was able to do whatever he or she wanted over that 3 to 4 months. And this international bank is actually quite lucky that this attacker wasn't part of a ransomware gang, because it would have been way worse. Because in this case, all the attacker did was downloaded essentially all of the data that existed on the mainframe. The attacker got away with literally all of it. And so while that was a pretty challenging breach for this organization, wasn't the same level of catastrophic event that could have happened. And I use this example, right, because it's important to realize that still of mainframe professionals, you get the question of, can the mainframe even be attacked? Who's attacking a mainframe? Are these things happening? And so I'd like to give this case that is, yes, it very much is happening. Most of these attacks are not published openly. And if they are published openly, what they'll say is company blank was breached, lost this many records. And they never quite say, where did the records come from, company? Because where do these records always stay? They stay in the mainframe, right? And so all they'll say is they lost, 10 million records. They don't say that it came off ZOS, but they are happening. And I have a couple more real-world examples as we go through here. Next up, tool alignment. How to use more of what you already own. This one's obviously close to my heart as the software guy. So coming up is integration. Connect the mainframe to your SIM. These are simple capabilities. These are projects that take hours to days, not even longer than that. And what you get is the ability for your security operations center to now officially start securing your mainframe. Because when you get real-time integration, they're getting the data that they need in order to effectively determine whether or not a threat is happening on the mainframe. And I have one little story around this. It's you got to make sure you're getting the right data. A lot of times organizations, if they were doing this, maybe they had a homegrown tool, Well, they would get, the SMF80 records in there. Boom, box checked. We've integrated the mainframe into your SIM. And you can do some good stuff with that, right? You are now monitoring logins, you are monitoring access to, to data sets. And so it's definitely a big step up. But one of the things that we've realized working to really do threat detection is that SMF logs are many times insufficient for actually determining if there was what we call an indicator of compromise, an anomalous event that could be malicious. And so you need to make sure that you have a set understanding of what indicators of compromise you need to be searching for. And I guarantee your security team has a long, long list, probably hundreds to thousands of indicators of compromise in their SIM, for their distributed environment. And they need to have those same types of capabilities for the mainframe. And a lot of times, again, SMF logs might be insufficient at providing the data they need to actually determine those indicators of compromise. And so this is just a challenged area, but when you get to success, right, they are getting the data that they need at the time that they need, which is real time. The second piece is connect your mainframe to ITSM. This could also read SOAR, right? SOAR, Security Orchestration Automation Response. It's actually very similar technology, almost identical to ITSM, but specifically designed for security personas. And so what this does, whether using ITSM or SOAR, is you're taking an alert, and instead of an alert coming to you, and maybe you get an email, maybe a text notification, right, that something bad has happened, it kicks off an automated workflow. Now, the automated workflow is very useful in two ways. The automation, one, ensures that everything happens quickly and efficiently, and it transfers from person to person. Sometimes if you have an alert, it will automatically run scans and tools to enhance that alert to see some clarifying details around it. Very useful. But it also makes sure things don't get lost, things don't get dropped. And we have a real world story about that one where the organization really failed hard. And this is just a quick image before we get to that real world story on what that looks like with the SIM. All of the enterprise tools, from cloud to end user systems to the routers and switches and applications, are currently feeding their logs into the SIM in real time. The only major system, the only core part of the enterprise that a lot of major organizations are missing today is the mainframe. So if this includes you, it's something that needs to be addressed. So let's talk this real world story real quick. So this organization, large insurance company, we wanted to talk about privileged users. And the company's system at that point was to list out all of their privileged users with this massive scanning capability that they had. And they had a lot of privileged users, thousands and thousands and thousands of privileged users, because it wasn't just the special operations, but they were also tracking all the different other types, from USS privileges to database privileges to storage privileges, and all these different ways you can be a privileged user. It was great. They were very, very thorough. What they did not have was the capacity to tell if at any point someone was modifying their privileges, because in their mind that can't happen, right? We use RecF, we use Top Secret, we use ACF2, right? We tell you what privileges you have, and that's that. Well, the reality of every mainframe environment that we see is there are many ways to do privilege escalation, right? We've talked ad nauseum about APF authorized libraries, how common they still are, unfortunately. We talked about all the other different ways like MBS commands and different types of components that you could use to do privilege escalation. It's just a lot. The attack surface for escalating privileges is a lot, so they happen. And so in this organization, one of their employees who had been with them for a long, long time had what they call the magic SVC. And the reason this employee had that is because they were not technically a privileged user at this point, but they used to be, and they still needed escalated privileges to do certain types of change management issues. And it was a very laborious process to go through the normal operations to get the privileges that they needed to do the change management, to go back. It was just a complete hassle. Talk about redundant manual processes. And so this employee had a magic SVC to escalate their privileges. Well, when we did some privileged user monitoring on their system, they told us, like, we don't need to monitor this. We have our list and we can just see what these people are doing. And then this employee's name popped up as a privileged user currently active on their system. And the mainframe security administrator looked at me and he's like, hey, your software is not working. This person doesn't have privileged access. Your software is wrong. And so we had this fun interaction. We kind of looked at each other, no one said something for a minute. And then they made the phone call. And as the phone call happened, I saw the individual's face kind of go a little white. And it really turned out that, yes, they were pretty honest about using the magic SVC, but you could see that the person I was speaking with finally understand that if you're not monitoring your privileged users, if you're not checking on your security setup, then you have nothing other than faith to hope that there's nothing wrong is happening in your environment because you're not actually checking. So luckily, this one, not a hack, just an employee that was kind of bypassing some rules. But it goes to show again just how critical it is that you assess your current status. And then the next piece is, again, automate as much as possible. And there's so many different ways you can do this. I've seen some very innovative organizations with homegrown tools for automation. There's obviously a lot of ITSM, we obviously have BMC Helix tools. There are a ton of tools that allow you to do this, but you really want to put effort into automating as much as possible, especially ones that help, in this specific case study, automate security and incident response. So anything that you can do around vulnerability detection, anything you do around automating your audits, right? A lot of times, what does it take to do an audit? Well, you have to run 100 queries, right? What if you had software that allowed you to do that automatically so that you can always know whether or not you were adhering to your own security principles so that you can go focus on other things? So automate as much as possible. Let's talk this real world example. This is one I was alluding to earlier. So in this case, this is a very, very, very famous hack of a credit reporting agency. If you probably Google just those things, it will come up, where there was a known vulnerability on software that they had. And so the vulnerability was published, and an individual in the Security Operations Center sent out an email to a couple people that, hey, we need to fix these vulnerabilities. So they had no system for orchestration and automation. It was a single individual who was sending emails, and then emails were how you tracked things getting done, how they communicated. Well, unfortunately, it died in the email. In this specific case, publicly, it just says that the recipients were unavailable. A friend of mine who helped work on this case, if I remember correctly, said that they no longer even worked at the company. So pretty bad email system, even for email system. But because it was just stuck in email, at that point, it's on you to now follow up to make sure that it happened. And how many organizations truly follow up after emails are sent on everything that's happening? It's a very hard way to do that. So that's why standardizing and automating and orchestrating is so critically important. So this vulnerability never got fixed. And then inevitably, they were able to hack the software. And what's really funny about this specific case study of this large credit reporting agency is that when you read about it, it'll tell you about the forward-facing application that was attacked. And they talk about the millions and millions of records that were released. But what's very interesting, and they don't go into detail on, is where did those records come from? Those records were all sitting on the mainframe. So in this specific case, it wasn't inherently that the mainframe was hacked, right? It was an application that was hacked, and the application touched the mainframe. But what's very interesting is, how did this agency figure out they were hacked? It was actually an operations guy who noticed an insane transfer of records that spiked, and it caused an actual uppage of MIPS. And so they were like, well, this is going to be costly. We should look into this. And that was actually how they found that they were being attacked. But that same anomalous behavior, again, even in this case, the mainframe wasn't specifically the one hacked, it was the application. But if you were tracking using database activity monitoring, that anomalous activity, that should have also been a real-time alert that someone could look into. Hey, there's this massive spike in reads far beyond our norm, our baseline. We need to go look into this. And they would have caught it well before the entire database was essentially downloaded. So again, orchestrate and automate your tools and solutions, and you're not going to make pretty egregious errors like leaving your vulnerability updates in an email, as well as, again, monitoring is a very, very critical task, even when the mainframe is not the specific thing that was exploited, because the mainframe is part of an integrated ecosystem. All right, last piece now, process and workflow alignment. So the next step, right, you really need to establish communication. It really has to come from top down so that organizations can understand specifically what you're doing. So what are we protecting? What are we protecting? At the end of the day, data is the most important thing that we are working to protect. And so the teams together, from the mainframe team to the security team, need to have that as their guiding vision so that they can use that to understand where's our critical data, our sensitive data, that if it was ransomed, we'd have to pay the ransom, otherwise we'd have to shut down. If it was stolen, we'd have to report to agencies and get a fine. Where is that data and how do we ultimately protect it? When the operations and security teams work together to understand where this data is, you can start building out security practices from there. And so why is that so important? Because if you start building out security practices and you're not even crystal clear on what you're trying to protect, you get some really unnecessary and really unhelpful standards that you could adhere to that end up costing the business money, time, effort, right? When they were really just unnecessary to begin with. And conversely, you sometimes don't protect the key critical things you need because you're focusing elsewhere. So establish that communication, and it has to come from top down. Next is invest in skills. I use the little image over the right all the time. There's a massive demand right now for mainframe skills. Massive. And there's a shortage, and all organizations are trying to find new, capable mainframers. On the other side of that, you have the security experts. There's a massive demand for that. Right? A commonly quoted, there's over 3 million open security jobs right now. So there are two groups of people that we're having trouble hiring, we're having trouble getting on our teams, and we're having trouble working with. And then at the center of that Venn diagram, a mainframer who's also a cybersecurity expert, there's like 15 of us, right? It is not a very common skill set to have both of, right? So it's very hard for someone to say, oh, well, we need this capability. Let's just open a requisition and we'll get them in the SOC, and then we can have a mainframe expert in our SOC, or vice versa. Every organization that we've seen do this well had to train internally, where they took a security analyst, a up-and-coming cybersecurity expert, and they showed him ZOS. And I'll tell you, as someone who really first touched a mainframe 3 years ago, but was very capable on Linux and Windows and several other systems, it's not that hard to become proficient enough at ZOS to do the cybersecurity necessary tools, right? At some point, I'm not going to be building something I have to hand over to a system programmer, right? I understand my limitations there. And so with the SOC, right? They're not going to go and start being a system programmer. That's not their job. But to understand ZOS enough to really coherently understand what's happening on the system and allow them to have the same dialogue and conversation so they can determine anomalous malicious activity using their tools, that is not that challenging. It just requires deliberate effort to coach, mentor, and have those conversations. And so it's a really important thing to have a internal investment in skills where you share. And conversely, a lot of mainframe organizations, if they were able to get more education around cybersecurity challenges that plague the enterprise, they'd probably identify unique things that the mainframe world that they should be focusing on that they weren't aware of. One of the things I love about working at BMC is we have some of our software consultants, really, really intelligent mainframers. Almost all of them are old system programmers or database administrators. And when we first started doing cybersecurity at BMC, and I started talking about cybersecurity things, the floodgates opened as they were like, oh, we should look at this. Oh, we could break it this way. Oh, if we did this and this, we'd be able to get privilege escalation. You look at that. Experts on the mainframe who know the system inside and out, you let them start really hacking at it, and it's amazing what comes out. We actually did a hackathon recently, and some of the internal innovation of the team was staggering. I guarantee your organizations are quite similar. So all it takes is a deliberate effort to do that conversation between cybersecurity and mainframe, and both teams end up a lot better for it. So here's just another real world example. Very, very large household name, credit card company. So they had a standard alerting tool. This is one of those tools that some other vendors work on, where it sits on the mainframe, and if it identifies something going wrong, it sends off an alert. So, okay, better than nothing, probably as close to real-time security continuous monitoring as some organizations get. So this alerting tool. And at this point, this was a hack. They were attacked, and they had the RACF database downloaded, right? When should your RACF database ever be downloaded? The answer is obviously never, especially with the 8-character limitation that most organizations are still living with, right? It is not complex to crack the RACF database. And even if we do use better levels of encryption, so it doesn't take a few hours, but it takes a whole lot longer, if you run pretty common data, we have data sets of just common passwords. If you run those common passwords against it, you'll crack at least a couple hundred in the span of 30 minutes. Right? So the RACF database cannot be downloaded because it gives you keys and credentials to so many employees, and many of them probably privileged. So RACF database, bad. We're all in agreement there. The alert sent to the SOC. Cool. All right. This looks pretty good so far. This organization's crushing it. They have an alerting tool. It caught the malicious activity. It sent the alert to the SOC. What happened was, back to our previous slide, the analysts had no idea what RACF was. So this alert came in, and they had no concept of what they were reading. And so it took a week for them to actually get around to actioning it, where they walked down to the mainframe team and said, hey, someone's messing with the RACF. Do you want this? A week, right? And we just discussed how easy it is for a RACF database to lead to many, many new credentials. So this is a really challenging event, because now they can essentially assume that their entire password user database is now breached, and they have to now change everyone's credentials, have to see if they have been using credentials to do a masquerading attack, and do things under Jimmy because they now have Jimmy's credentials, right? So it's a very challenging event for this organization. But what's so unfortunate is it was so unnecessary, because the alert got there in real time. It was nothing more than a training and experience issue that caused them to be hurt in this way. So how do we do better with this? I like to leverage frameworks. Big framework guy, because some smarter people than me have already come up with a lot of the answers. And so what we're seeing here, and I don't want to go too deep into it. I do a lot of talking about zero trust. I'm a very big fan of it, specifically this zero trust model. And the reason I like this model so much is you see the big juicy center of it is the data, right? Because that's what we're supposed to be doing, is the data. But when you start really trying to figure out how to bridge and merge and do all of these things, leverage some open frameworks. You don't have to start from scratch. But in order to be successful with implementing a large framework like this enterprise level framework, right, you'll never be successful unless you have an integrated security and operations team doing SecOps. So if you guys are interested, we can talk zero trust again a little bit later. Right, so how to connect the mainframe to your SecOps strategy really is to treat it like every other server. And again, this is another framework, but this one is specifically around types of capabilities that you need on the mainframe. And if you've seen other talks before, I use this a lot. This is NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. And we'll actually dive into this one a little bit. There's 5 things you need to be able to say, I can do this on every platform, whether it's a Windows PC or whether it's your mainframe. The first is you need to be able to identify it, right? You need to know how many you have, you need to know where they are, and in many cases, you need to know what's on it. So for the mainframe, you probably know how many mainframes you have, but you really want to be able to know where's our juicy critical data that we are looking to protect, right? So first, identify. Second is protect. You need to harden it. And this is the easiest one for every organization to understand is, right, we want to put in things like RACF and, maybe some, intrusion detection systems and different things in there to harden the mainframe to keep bad guys out and to keep insider threats from having an outsized influence on what they're allowed to do. What a lot of organizations do is they really stop here, right? You need to test, to make sure your protection works, but you also need to continue along this model, right? Because you need to always be able to detect anomalous and malicious activity. Right? This comes under the real-time security continuous monitoring that we spoke about many times already, and it needs to be tied directly to your response through the orchestration automation. which is why a lot of times detection and response come together as a key package. If you use the last case study, having detection, having an alert without incident response, not useful. Not useful at all, right? So you need to have these things tied together, and so you come down to the mean time to response. And then the last piece is around recovery. This is an area where I'd argue mainframes tend to be very, very good. They, have always been such a core part of an IT enterprise that we've had a lot of disaster recovery plans. What's changed the game a little bit is ransomware. You need to make sure that your recovery systems work against an offensive threat. So it's not just, can I do backups, but are my backups going to work if a malicious individual is trying to destroy them, trying to destroy my ability to do backups, right? You need to figure out, are these proofed from hackers, my recovery processes? And if the answer is yes, then you're looking good. If the answer is a system programmer could easily keep us from ever recovering, well, then the answer is no. So you need to have those as an initiative to go take a look at that, because you don't want to figure that out when it's too late. And here's just some security best practices from mature organizations that we found through our research. So the top 3 mainframe security tasks. So configuration management. This is doing things like making sure that you're in adherence to your own security policies and procedures, compliance and audit. This should be happening monthly, at least monthly, if not using tools to do it automatically. And the reason we say that is a lot of organizations get their audit every year. And so they get in compliance, they get everything that's a military term, they get everything set up. And then the second that audit finishes, well, we live in a dynamic world. Things start changing. Well, when things start changing, configurations are always going to, unfortunately, come out of compliance, come out of regulation. And so you start to lose that adherence. Your security posture falls. And what you don't want to do is wait 11 months, and then the month before the audit's due again, you have to sprint to get back into compliance. So doing it regularly, iteratively, and ideally automatically allows you to not drift out of compliance and keeps you safe. Second is penetration tests, at least monthly. You can have the best security policies, procedures in the world, but the truth is you don't know that is true until you have someone test it. We recently did a big penetration test at a very, very large international bank, and they were very confident in their security practices. Nothing's ever happened to us. We're good. Our security policies, you can't even hack the mainframe. They were very, very confident. And so when we went in, what the end result happened is we were able to show them the myriad of different ways that we were able to exploit their system that they were just unaware of. So they had this confidence of being good because nothing bad had happened to them, which is a common feeling that I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have. They felt good because nothing bad happened to them. But they were just, in fact, lucky because they were not good. There was so many unknown unknowns. And unknown unknowns are the scariest thing that penetration testers can help illuminate for an organization. And then the third is vulnerability scans. And vulnerability scans fall under a lot of names. A lot of things are called vulnerability scans. But this could be your dynamic application security testing, right? This is where you're testing to see, does my mainframe software have backdoors in it, or even not backdoors, vulnerabilities in it, that allows someone to exploit it? People still think that's not possible. We can show you very much that it is. Or does my configuration setting, right? It's back to configuration management. Are there vulnerabilities here that allow someone to take advantage of different components, right? These scans should be happening at least monthly. And honestly, vulnerability scans at this point should be almost ongoing. So these are the top 3 mainframe security tasks that would really help when your security and operations teams are working together. Because your operations teams can point out the different areas for these things to happen. You can automate it with tools, and then your security team can be the ones to actually do it so that your operations teams don't have to spend time and energy that they don't have. And the security team, who this is their responsibility, are functionally able to do their job on the mainframe. So just to kind of encapsulate what we discussed about, the end state of if you were able to get a true integrated security, operations, SecOps, organizational structure, what do you get? You get merged priorities where both teams care as much about uptime as they do about security, and they figure out the best thing for the business. You get streamlined communication where organizations are working with each other and not against each other. You have an integrated security architecture, which is the best thing for the enterprise, for the organization for reducing risk. It's just more effective. And you also get proactive and effective security design. This saves time, this saves effort, this saves angst, because you get the right security baked in up front rather than trying to attach band-aids on the back end. And then you get expedited, efficient IT operations. At the end of the day, because I know I'm speaking to more operations people than security people, what this is going to do is make it easier for operations, because you're going to get an enterprise level asset supporting you, right? So this is why the operations team, one thing I always recommend is to be the ones pushing, advocating for this, going up to the CIO and saying, where's our cybersecurity? Where's our help? We want SecOps. Because again, with many of the clients in large banks, we found that to be the most effective method. Also, nice part just between us, a lot of times it comes with more budget, because cybersecurity always has budget. If they identify a risk, the organization has to pay for it. Operations doesn't always get budget in the same capacity. So another nice little thing. And then here's just a little architecture. This is kind of, because we talk a lot about that SIEM integration piece, you notice that there's a tremendous amount of logs that can be part of what you need to do your indicator compromise. And again, many of these logs need to be enriched with information that would make them truly functional at doing that anomaly malicious activity detection capability. So for example, right, it's very common for RACF and Top Secret to list what privileges the user has, but many other logs don't. And so one type of enrichment that you might include is adding their credentials, their privileges to each log, whether or not it came from RACF Top Secret. And so that way you can easily query and filter at the back end for all your privileged users. It also allows you to do real quick things like privilege escalation, which is one of the number one ways to stop an attack before it becomes catastrophic, and some other really powerful ways. So we can talk more about this if anyone's interested. And then I just want to give a use case for privilege escalation when this goes right. So this is a good case right here. This is a example where someone is able to again, maybe it's a ShadePath library, maybe it's Magic SVC, whatever it is, but now they're special in operations when previously they weren't. You have a tool that automatically responds to that by blocking their access. So privilege escalation happens, and the tool immediately, in real time, cancels their access and closes them out until someone's able to look into it, because now the threat is so great to the system. The threat events are visible in the SIEM, and the SOC is immediately alerted that something bad has happened, and they can have that immediate conversation with ops, so the system programmer or the RACF security administrator can go and do that instant response, look into that event, either give the person their credentials back if they, if it was somehow, not a big issue, or figure out the greater policy changes and configurations that need to stop that malicious activity from happening again. Where your mean time detection, mean time to response is cut drastically down through that automation, through that orchestration, rather than event happening and then you have a bunch of Lego pieces that you're trying to put together to understand what happened there. So this is an example of SecOps done right. So to close out, the key takeaways, right? You've heard them lots. Let's just close out consistently. Organizational alignment, right? You need to merge priorities. You need to keep everything together. You need actionable insights, right? So integration doesn't mean just get the data over, check a box for compliance, and we're done. If you're not getting actionable insights for indicators of compromise, then you're not done there. That's not true integration. For tool integration, you want to leverage your existing tools. You likely have ITSM. You might even have SOAR. A lot of organizations do these days, right? So you want to leverage your existing tools in order to make sure that you're getting everything out of those and that the mainframe's included. And last piece, proactive cybersecurity. When security is baked in, it saves money, it saves time, energy, and angst. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate being here. Please let me know if there's any questions, and hope to talk again soon.